introduction. Today's session is, I'm very excited. I think I'm going to learn about it for sure from Yolanda, who I know from long time ago. We studied in not the same course, but MBA or course in London Business School. And then we kept in touch, different paths, but I really appreciate what Yolanda is doing in a space which I think is very relevant to all of us. Some people like to talk more about it than others. So I leave the whole session on your hand, Yolanda. I think we're in good company. This is friends and family today. I'm sure there's going to be good discussions. And so let's get started.
Cool. We've got, are you going to stay with us? What sort of not stay with us, aren't you, Antonio?
I will stay with that. I just need to switch to my mobile in 15 minutes, but yes, I'm going to be here.
Oh, great. Brilliant. Well, hello, everyone. It's so nice to be back here with you all. I used to come weekly, actually, for quite a while. And then I took up a course, a one-year course. And it's so intense. I'm up until midnight working every night. So I had to drop this a bit. But it's brilliant to be back here with you all. I think very highly of anybody that's involved in initiatives like this. Because it's all, you know, it's all brain power, it's all headspace that's being used up, isn't it? So it's generous of all of you, even to turn up today, let alone for the entire year you've been turning up. My take on resilience and on mental wellness for professionals is what I'd like to share with you today. But, you know, it has to be clear from the start that there's a lot of help one can get out there. There are nearly endless ways of approaching a matter like this. And obviously, I can't be an expert on everything, but I have, for a number of years, helped thousands of people with my approach. So I am just humbled to be meeting here with you today and letting you know about how I go about helping professionals who come to me when they think they're not feeling that resilience, when they think their mental wellness is nowhere to be seen. Okay, so just a quick background on me so you know who you've got in front of you. I'm Spanish, like Antonio. I graduated in business and economics in Spain, worked as a chartered accountant there for a number of years. Then I moved to London, where I worked in banking for 10 years for what was then the biggest bank in the world, Citi. And I left Citi to go to London Business School, where I studied a master's in finance, my MSc in finance, where Antonio was doing his MBA with my husband. That's why we're also mates. And I now, that was up until sort of 12, 13 years ago. And I now have what people love to call a portfolio career, which involves a couple of net roles and mainly in, well, the most notable one is in Board Apprentice Global, which is a not-for-profit where we empower diverse candidates to get board roles, because diverse candidates have even more trouble to get board roles than anyone else that's got a certain acumen, okay? So I also run Tap It Better, which is my mental wellness coaching and tapping business. And I have quite a busy CSR activity on the side where I have introduced my combined approach into schools as well. Here, I'm very proud to say, because, you know, once you become a mother, I don't know, or a father, I don't know what you guys think, you might think differently. But I think once you become a parent, above all else, above the professional you are, above everything else you are, you're a parent. So from the word go, I decided that whatever I achieved in the field of mental health, I would always try to put to good use for the next generation. So my CSR side is very strongly focused on schools, on local schools. These days, my business runs very busily, but frankly, I've never spent a pound on publicity. I am part of a very powerful network that I have created through the years of referrals, where my own peers, my own peers in the finance field and in the London Business School Global Network, my own peers already knew me before I could even help them if they were anxious, right? They already knew me, they already trusted me. Right now, if anyone here is a member of the London Business School Alumni Club, they've just asked me to put an event together for them and the Spain Club as well. So you might see it. Other clubs are adding themselves little by little. So you might see that coming up as well. And my referral network really is what keeps my business going. It includes one of the foremost psychiatric clinics in the UK. You might have heard of it. It's called The Priory. And one of the consultants there, for reasons I can't disclose, knows my anxious pains, the things like that, for a while now. So my combined approach to resilience, to mental wellness for professionals is a mix of a technique, a cognitive somatic technique called tapping, which you might have come across. And I'd like to talk to you about that today because it's I could talk to you about so much of all the years I've been training and I've been working. But this part of it just lends itself really well to explain what is it, what's the science behind it, how can you use it, what can you use it for, and how do you use it? So we'll get a go at having a little practice so you can see exactly what I mean, okay? And then I will just quickly move on to the other part of my approach, which is to do with an understanding of the mind. And there's no way I can explain much of that. It could take me hours, which we don't have, but I'll give you just a glimpse. So you have an idea of how the circle closes and how mental resilience, even if it looks like it's not there, my message for you, even if you take nothing else from today, is a strong, powerful message of hope. If ever you find yourselves in a moment where resilience seems but a distant memory, be absolutely sure, one, that you're not broken and nothing needs fixing, and two, that resilience was always there. It just looks like it's left you, but it absolutely hasn't. Okay, if you take nothing else, remember, no one's broken and no one needs fixing. So I thought I set up a couple of polls to just gather some info from you anonymously, entirely anonymously, just to guide the talk to a place where it'll be more relevant for people, really. Okay, so I'm gonna launch the first poll very quickly. Voila. Which of the below are you more interested in? Anonymously, you can let me know. And when we use examples, we can tap on that instead of tapping on something else. Go. I can't see anybody voting. I hope this is working. Can you people see this poll? Like Antonio, can you see the poll? Oh yeah, I'm starting to see some votes coming through, sorry.
Yes, the only thing, they all come together.
Yeah.
That's okay.
We need to go back to the last one. There's the fourth one maybe at the end.
Okay, it's no problem. Just for the moment, I only require an answer to the first question. And I'll give you a minute more so that you can look at perhaps number 1 and 2. Okay, so where your interest lies, and this one is anonymous, and two, it doesn't mean you're suffering this, but you still might be interested. There might be somebody in your circle who could do with learning a bit more about this. Okay, so that's just polls number 1 and 2. I'll give you a few more seconds if anybody else would like to vote. There's still a couple more votes to come in. I think just 1 or 2 more people. That's fine. That's great. So I can see that, oh, hang on, is somebody writing, we cannot submit if we, oh, right, okay, 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 great, that's fine, that's fine. Thank you very much. I'll have to have a quick look at all of it then. And the results are telling me that a couple of things are more preeminent, more in your field of interest, which is really good to know. And most people have children, so we'll dedicate just a little bit to how you might help your children with this. And then the intensities, okay. We might launch it just for the intensities later as well. That's brilliant. That's really gold dust information. And I'm going to end the poll now. And we can crack on. Okay. Good. There you go. So my combined approach starts with the tapping. So I'd like to talk to you about the tapping for a bit, if that's okay. What is it? It's a technique, and I insist on the word technique because there is absolutely no belief system behind it. And it's a technique that involves tapping on certain acupuncture points, much like I'm doing right now, which sends calming signals to the brain. And what's interesting about it is, of course, if it's sending calming signals to the brain, that's going to show somehow. Can we see the signals? Sadly, we can't see the signals and we can't measure the signals. So as a Masters of Science, I start to worry, well, how do we know what's happening, right? So, of course, there are ways of looking at what's happening. And so I'll just say that these calming signals to the brain, if you think about it, there's very, very little, apart from a couple of reflexes, there's very, very little that happens in your system that doesn't go through your brain, right? So if you can calm your brain, and I'll explain in detail what I mean by that, there's a whole plethora of wonderful effects that you can achieve from that, okay? Just imagine a hot radiator that you touch and you immediately move your hand because otherwise you get burned, right? That process entirely relies on signaling to the brain, which is processed, and an immediate response is sent back. That makes you move your hand. That's the same type of signaling that tapping relies on. So how do we know that tapping is in fact producing signaling? Because we've done the research behind it. And this, the reason it says MSc after my name, it's pretty much saying I'm a bit of a science geek. So despite what it might appear, working in complementary therapies, I am really into this science part. So, but I am going to refrain and just give you the main bits of the science. There are about 160 studies done, of which about half are in fact randomized controlled trials, because you see, tapping is quite new. It's only been around for 30 or 40 years. So it's not even had that much time to get gazillions of studies done. More are coming every day. But I'll tell you what the main science behind it is. Of course, there are mechanism studies, there are outcome studies, and then there are dismantling studies. So the outcome studies, for example, are the ones that show whether it works or doesn't, whether it does what it says on the tin. And it is quite clear that it does produce results. I'll show you a slide in a minute. It does produce improvements, statistically significant improvements. In fact, large effect sizes, in some cases, unusually large effect sizes in improving things like stress, anxiety, pain, academic performance, and what else? Oh, PTSD is a huge one. Literally, the research has been done with American vets, and literally, in under 6 sessions per the research, they can no longer be diagnosed to have PTSD. And that's one of the most severe things we look at in tapping. So the outcome studies have proven it works. The mechanism studies, I suppose, are the ones that interest me even more, in that they explain, what's going on, what's happening while we're tapping. And the science is very clear again. There are very clear measurements you can take of stress hormones, like cortisol, and the drop in cortisol is huge. The original study came up with an average drop of 24% drop in cortisol in one session, in one tapping session. The replication study, and those of you that are into science are probably familiar with the fact that you always want to replicate science so that nobody can even contest it, I suppose. And the replication study came up even better. It's in the 40s, 40% drop in cortisol in one tapping session, okay? So if you imagine when your cortisol is lower, your stress response is lower, isn't it? You can think more clearly, you can digest more clearly, more easily. There's so much more you can do better when you're not in high cortisol. The other bit of the science that's very, very clear in the mechanism studies is to do with the amygdala, the part of your brain that some of you might be familiar with that wonderful Greek name, almond-shaped in your mid-brain, that is the bit of your brain that kicks off the fight or flight. And this bit of your brain is proven, Harvard no less proved in a 10-year study, that the stimulation of these acupuncture points decreases blood flow to that part of your brain. It's called decreased amygdala activation. And of course, that, if you think about it, in my mind is the origin of why you even have less cortisol going around in your body. Why have you got less reduced stress hormones? It all starts in the same bit. And when I say it all starts in the amygdala, by all I mean, it can be that you're worried, stressed out, or overwhelmed, but it can even be that you're in pain. Pain is going to get you in fight or flight, isn't it? So in my mind, that is why even physical manifestations often get better when people get into tapping, okay? There's only so much we will change in your body in some minutes of tapping, but I think it's probably useful to know that that it all goes through your brain, and where it all kicks off, so to speak, is in the amygdala. And if you can reduce the blood flow to there, then it stands to reason you're going to be able to reasonably expect to feel calmer. But what about all the other wonderful side effects of that amygdala not being so activated? When that bit of you isn't receiving all the blood and keeping you as if you really were running in front of that tiger, when it's not doing that, then all that wonderful blood flow can go elsewhere. It's liberated to go places like your frontal lobe, for clear thinking, for delivering a good talk, for remembering, for that tricky conversation. And that's when you leave the room and you've said the 3 key things you wanted to tell that person, right? Whereas the opposite is when you're, and you go and you have that conversation with the tricky client, say, and you go and you leave and you think, can't believe I didn't mention so-and-so, for example. That's typical, that's classic, going blank. Blood flow all going to keeping you alive, rather than going to any other bits of brain function. like digestion as well. We all intuitively know that we don't digest very well when we're very stressed out. Well, this is clear proof of why. When all your blood is keeping you up there are many functions that are not going to be critical for survival, and they're not going to be well served, such as digesting breakfast. Okay, right. So that's the science behind it. There have also been dismantling studies, I'll go over that quickly, that show that the tapping on the acupoints is in fact the active ingredient, that it is not a placebo, and that the success of all these studies is in fact not due to other factors such as, the relationship with your therapist, the fact that you might find it relaxing, that there's a repetitive, quiet, gentle action on your body, right? All that has been looked at, and there has even been a meta-analysis done on the dismantling studies that has shown that there is no doubt that it is doing stuff, and that it is the tapping that is the active ingredient in this. So I don't want you to worry ever about doing it right or wrong. If you want to remember one sentence about this, it's feel the feeling and do the tapping. We're gonna tap in a moment, okay? Feel the feeling and do the tapping. Don't worry about whether you're missing some points. Don't worry about whether you're saying the right thing, because it's not in the saying. It's in the feeling, which activates that amygdala. Because of course, you can't calm down an amygdala that isn't fired up. So we'll go quite specific and quite on point on what the pressure is, or the worry is, or the matter is that we're tapping on. And the going specific, even though it's not very fashionable to talk about the problem, and people like to tell you about thinking only positively and things like that, the first principle in psychology is to recognize the issue before you can sort it out. And really what I do is a mix of psychology with acupressure, okay? So I am going to try, I don't know if I can, because I've just been made host, but I'm going to try and leave you in some breakout rooms for, say, just 4 minutes, even 4 or 5 minutes, so that, and they're going to be assigned automatically into, it's 20 people, so probably what, 4 breakout rooms, and I'm going to just give you a quick assignment to decide in your experience, and it doesn't have to be your personal experience, but you might run a team or certainly be part of one. What is the one complaint, the one mental health issue that you would like me to not miss today? Okay? And you voted before on what you're interested in. I'd now like to know nearly more in your environment, in your teams, in your work. I'll give you 4 minutes to decide on one word, and then I'll ask one person from each team to give me that one word, and we'll get tapping on it. How about that? Is that a good plan? Off you go then. Continue now with what I was going to do, which is really talking very briefly about the take-up of tapping. In the US, it's already been, in all the evidence-based lists by the American Psychology Association, the NREPP as well, which is more on the psychiatric side of things. It's made it to the evidence-based list years ago. In places like Japan, it's taught in psychology degrees and also in medical schools. I have a colleague called Dr. Ayami Morikawa, who actually works for the United Nations, but also teaches tapping in medical schools. In the UK, it's pretty cool that I have various colleagues who are consultant psychiatrists in the NHS, and they use tapping with their patients. And I know an NHS GP who's also introducing this in prisons in the UK. So all sorts of initiatives all over the world that are really, well, just taking it up, basically. There is one quick thing that I forgot to show you, and if I manage to share my screen, I just want you to have a quick look before we start tapping, okay? At some of the biological markers that the research has shown you can expect to have changing in your body after you do tapping. I'll be really quick with this because I want to crack on with the actual tapping. Okay, let me see if I can actually find it.
Yolanda, I've just
Hello.
put in an article from the NIH, so the National Institute of Health,
Yeah,
that talks about physiological
Yeah.
effects.
yeah.
So just in case anybody wants to read it from an actual health authority.
Yeah. I was going to show you exactly the NIH website that shows the research for the biological markers, but thank you for that. Really, I think we're talking about the same thing, except my Zoom is being a rebel and will not let me share my screen. So I can then in a minute, while we're tapping, maybe while you're all tapping, I might drop the link in the chat so people can have a look at the actual article, because frankly, it's quite staggering. I will just very quickly just bring it up for myself and read you out some of the biological markers, which are just amazing. So for this study, which was done in group, the cortisol dropped by 37%, pain dropped by 57%, anxiety by 40%, depression by 35%, PTSD symptoms by 32%, the resting heart rate went down by 8%, the psychological questionnaire for happiness showed an increase of 31%, blood pressure dropped by 8%, food cravings dropped by a staggering 74%. Loads of people use it for weight loss. I'm one of them. I've lost 1 stone for the moment, another one to go. Wow. And incredibly, in terms of immunity, your IgA immunity marker, salivary IgA, was measured and it was up by 113%. Apart from all that, which is really rather staggering, I think, apart from all that, there's you're probably familiar with the fact that genes are now understood to be able to be sort of switched on and off. It's called gene expression. And there were 72 genes whose expression changed after tapping as well, mainly involving learning and emotional regulation, which is very consistent with what we've seen in clinical studies, where people just feel calmer, remember better, make better food choices, all sorts of things like that. Okay. And by the way, all the MRI scans, all the brain scans done to look at that amygdala have also been done with the gold standard of MRIs, which is functional MRIs. Anyway, I'll shut up about the science now. And how about we do a bit of tapping? I would invite you all to choose one of those things that you were talking about, which I found really interesting, in which of course all have one thing in common. They all have one thing in common. It's overstimulation. It's that arousal of that amygdala. You cannot be under pressure and have a very calm amygdala. It doesn't happen. You cannot be under stress because you have too many meetings one after the other, or because you have competing demands on you and you can't balance your family with your work and have a very calm amygdala. You cannot have, I can't even understand you cannot feel the hopelessness or feel the anger and be in the presence of a very calm amygdala. And lastly, I've mentioned that one already. So essentially, what all that lot have in common is that amygdala being nearly on overdrive and not quite being able to tone down that intensity, tone down that thermostat, which is really what tapping does. So I'm gonna guide you through this tapping. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. You can just watch me. You might think it looks ridiculous. I certainly did the first time I saw it when I was a banker and a famous speaker came into the bank to talk to us about stress relief. You don't have to do it. You can take off your video if you want, but I suggest that you choose that one thing that is bothering you, not the most severe thing in your life. If it's got the word severe in it, please don't do it. Please don't do it here, because you could get yourself into a state, and we're not one-on-one, so that I can get you out of it. But perhaps something that you are bothered about. And I would launch the ball, but I can't be bothered. Just think in your head, from 0 to 10, this feeling I have, how bad is it? How bad is this feeling? How stressed do I feel right now? So where 0 is, I'm not stressed at all, and 10 is unbearable stress. Make a mental note, and let's start tapping. I'm going to use stress as the main theme, but you can apply it to a different feeling if that's what your case is. Even though there's a setup statement at the front, at the start, and then a summary sentence to go over the other points. So even though I feel all this stress in my life, and I feel like I can't cope very well, and it's too many meetings, it's in too many demands, and too much going on, and too much COVID anxiety, and too many economy worries, I accept myself anyway. I give my feelings a voice, I honor them, and then we'll keep tapping. Even though I'm worried about my level of stress, even though I'm so stressed out, I accept myself anyway. I'll just keep tapping and see if it will help me calm down. 3 times you do that, even though I'm so stressed out. And I really can't see, and I really can't see how I'm gonna get through all this stress. Too much going on with me and with my life. I accept myself anyway. And I'll just keep tapping and see if this helps me calm down. So then you find a summary sentence. When you do it, you don't have to talk. I'm only talking to guide you. Distress, and go over the other points. These are all endpoints of acupuncture channels, very well known. All this stress. Incidentally, this is a point for trauma. You should never really tap on trauma on your own. All this stress in my life. All this stress. All very, very, very well-known acupuncture endpoints. All this stress in my body. Perhaps there's a part of your body that's feeling this stress even more than the rest. People often report, they have tense shoulders, so a tight throat. Focus on that. This tight, stressed throat. My throat seems to be feeling it. I often get people who get shoulder trouble, and it's a bit as if, in a funny sort of way, it's a bit as if you're feeling the weight of the world physically on your shoulders. So sometimes we'll say things like, all the weight of the world on my shoulders, all this weight of the world, okay? All this stress in my body. Can you see what I'm doing? We'll stick with the basic sequence. I won't use the fingers next time. Collarbone, under the arm, back to the head. All this stress in my body. All this stress in my life. I choose to let it go. I choose peace, and I choose calm. All this anxiety, whatever it might be, all this pressure, I choose to release it. I choose to give my body permission to receive all these lovely calming signals and let go of this intensity. Letting go of this intensity, letting go of this feeling. Feeling calm and ready for the next bit of my day. When I do this in schools, I'll say to the children, ready for the maths. And while we're tapping, I might take, so that we use our time wisely, I might take a moment to mention how you might use this with children. If you have a teenager, let me know. I'll send you some videos of, you know, even Fernando Alonso doing tapping and famous people and all that, if they're interested. But really, you use it the same way. You start by the side of the hand, a very important gut channel, gut acupuncture channel, with a setup statement, and they, whatever they're feeling, even though I'm anxious about my A levels, even though I'm anxious about my exams, I accept myself anyway, I'll give this a go. Even though I'm anxious, remember, you don't need to believe in it. So that's the awesome thing about it. I work quite a lot with teenagers as well, although I work mainly with professionals. Even though I feel this feeling, that's okay, I'll just keep tapping 3 times. Then summary sentence. If you have young children, let me know as well. I can recommend a lovely book where this is, you know, a monkey, and this is whatever, I can't remember. Oh yeah, this is the birds tweeting in your hairy eyebrows, and the eagle eye point, and the lion cry point, and this one is about a fire dragon and whatever. So I used to work with kids much more than I do now, but for years I got little kiddies that couldn't sleep very well, and they did a few minutes of tapping and then they went off to sleep. In fact, the first person ever I tapped on that wasn't me, was my newborn baby. And when I saw she was going to sleep, I thought, oh my God, this is good stuff. Okay, great. So we can take a break now. Just do a bit of diaphragmatic breathing, maybe, if you want to. Otherwise, just a deep breath will do. If you have a bit of water, take a bit of water. There you go. You've experienced your first, maybe not first, round of tapping. I'm going to, while I speak, take a moment to get that research that we were talking about all the biological markers, precisely in the website you were talking about. There you go, in nih.gov. Yeah, this is the one. Hang on. And I am literally going back and putting it in the chat, so that, I mean, there's so much more you could look at, you could spend all day, but you might not even be interested. So that's one good example. And there are various websites where you can look at all this research. So I wonder, because I didn't launch the poll really at the right time. So I would only ask that those of you that have done the tapping, you know, thumbs up, thumbs middle, or thumbs down. Anyone feeling a bit better already? Yeah, I can see some thumbs ups there. Some people haven't changed. Be prepared to, oh, thank you so much. That's really great to see. Be prepared to persevere a little, because sometimes a few minutes of tapping won't do it. It might be a bit of a miracle if it did, you know. In fact, it is quite really notable that it has done anything in only a few minutes of our time. So my advice, using it in practical terms, would be, you know, in between meetings, whenever you're feeling the feeling, you don't need to talk, just feel the feeling and do the tapping, because this is a very physical intervention, exactly like a massage. And if your arm is sore, massage it anytime you like, right? Same as you would do with that. Anytime you're feeling a bit, you've got your points. The kiddies always call them, you know, my magic points. If you have children, remind them that even when mommy or daddy are not around, they always have their magic points. The take-up is staggering in schools. I literally cannot cope with the demand, because it's so child-friendly. You never touch anyone. The children mirror you, so it's very safeguarding friendly as well. You know, just, I don't know, bear it in mind if your school needs a very safeguarding, friendly, very well-proven intervention, right? So, quick. A couple of minutes about another bit that I combine with this in my practice, and I will shut up and take all your questions, okay? So my combined approach that I was mentioning earlier is to do with not not just using a physical intervention that brings down your cortisol, but also, for some reason, I seem to end up working with loads of clever professionals who, like a discussion, like to unpick things, which I greatly enjoy as well, I must admit. So I will just let you have a glimpse of the fact that I combine the tapping when needed with a form of mental health coaching called the 3 Principles of Innate Well-Being. I have been trained by 2 consultant psychiatrists who use it in their practice as well. Different psychiatrists, by the way, from the ones that use the tapping. And really, it is about sharing an understanding of how the human experience really works and not how it looks like it works. And it really, one of the basic premises, and I really can't go into it, but one of the basic premises is how the human experience is really experienced inside out and not outside in. And while it might really look like all this stuff that's going on has got the power to create our feelings, in actual fact, that's not true. In actual fact, you can never feel what's out there. You can never feel your circumstances. The only thing you can ever feel is you're thinking about it. And for any circumstance, for any situation, there's an infinite number of thoughts you could be having, but you happen to be having a given one. And that's the one that will define whether your experience is horrendous, is okay, or anything in between. So just a quick glimpse of how all these people that come to me, I genuinely think there is value in unpicking, in understanding under that light, understanding what it is that people might be feeling, where it comes from, and where all the power sits, which is, of course, in you, like it always was. Right, shush, Yolanda. Questions?
Thank you, Yolanda. Very, very interesting. I've never seen this before, so I'm going to practice that for sure.
Antonio.
For sure. There's time we have 5 minutes left. 1 or 2 questions?
I have a question. Yep,
yeah.
I have a question. So how does this technique, I mean, I've read about it as well. But in conjunction with other techniques that are out there, like how does this technique compare in terms of somatic stimulation, like, for example, sound therapy, sound bathing, or other types, and how is it correlated with some other physical sciences that are burgeoning, like quantum field, scientific research.
That's such an amazing question.
And cymatics, for example, which is a study of, right?
Yeah. So. And interestingly, I'd never even heard of sound bathing until a couple of weeks ago when London Business School organized a session, and I got to experience it. I thought it was fab. And the next speaker is me. So it was really, really interesting.
We did it in my retreat last year.
Yeah, oh, great. That's so cool. Maybe we need to connect.
We'll connect.
I wish I could answer that question, but the fact is certain comparisons haven't happened yet. All the comparisons, bye Christian, all the comparisons have happened mainly against EMDR and against CBT, because the strength of tapping lies in that kind of matter, in clearing trauma, in clearing anxiety. So I can assure you that in every study that's done, it either comes out the same or better. It's awesome. It's really, but of course, the thing about CBT, for example, is there are thousands of studies done on CBT and only 160 done on tapping because it's so much newer, right? So even in terms of meta-analysis, there are a few hundred done on CBT and only half a dozen done in tapping. But I don't want to bore you, but it generally comes out often ahead of CBT and very, very often ahead of even of EMDR, which is quite staggering, really. But you know, we can't claim to be the kings of the world yet, despite the take-up, because it's still younger. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Do you know Shirzad Shamine's positive intelligence, and especially his practice of PQ reps for strengthening mental muscles? It reminds me your technique. I think it is very closely related. Do you know it?
No, I don't, but I would love to look into it, because there may be a relationship that I just haven't been made aware of. There is, you know, there's so much we don't know, right? And it is the old adage, how do you know what you don't know, right? So if you wouldn't mind popping that name of that technique in the chat, I will write it down and look into it, Milan. Thank you so much. Anyone else?
Yes, just how often do you recommend doing this? How much time do you recommend giving to it?
A few minutes is plenty, and you will know you've done enough, because you will feel calmer, and because you will get a bit fed up. You'll start thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? That's a really good sign in tapping. Either yawning, interestingly, empirically, we've seen people yawn a lot because it's a bit like the brain goes, that's better. Or that feeling when you start thinking, well, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? It's because you're dropping. Your intensity is dropping down, and you're starting to be over it, which is a great sign. Deep breath and off you go. You can never tap too much. In 40 years or so of tapping, which was created in an American hospital and it's being closely watched, in 40 years, there hasn't been one side effect reported. So you can never hurt yourself, and you can never over tap. You will get bored before you over tap, I suppose. I would not recommend doing it any more often than once every hour, even in acute situations. I have a case I know closely, which is well documented because he was one of the creators of the method, whose brother had an operation, and in the middle of the operation, he had a stroke. So when he came out, it was evident that something was very wrong, and it was very unclear what was happening until he was brain scanned, and it was evident that he'd had a stroke. So this is the creator of the method, Roger Callahan, PhD, in an American hospital, okay, clinical psychologist, and his wife, and it was the wife's brother. And what they did was they literally stood next to him, either side, and they tapped on him once per hour. In the morning, when the operation had just happened, he couldn't tap himself. In the afternoon, he could tap on himself. And they did it once every hour. So if the creators of the method, even in an acute case, don't do it more often than once every hour, you know, I wouldn't bother with more than that, I suppose, is the answer. Anyone else?
Is the optimal time before bed if you want to relieve stress to sleep, maybe?
Yeah.
Is that optimal?
Yeah, it depends on if sleep is one of your things, then definitely. Then for you, one of the best times would be before bed. But that said, any tapping at any time will release the calming signals to the brain and will help you at any time. And in some cases, if you think you're a bit acute, you know, if anyone thinks they're a bit acute, drop me a line and we can have a free chat. But the more often you bring down that intensity, the less likely it is to peak, you see? But definitely for sleeping, it's really good to tap a few minutes before bed. 5 minutes is plenty. And again, you'll get fed up, you'll want to get cozy, and you will know you've done enough tapping. And my tip for sleeping is to then obviously consider that sleeping is a still activity. So once you're done tapping, get as comfy as you like and visualize the tapping, because your brain can't tell the difference very well between whether you are in fact tapping or whether you're just visualizing the tapping. So get yourself in that comfy mode and keep, and a very simple sentence I recommend is to just think about that drowsy feeling and to just think this drowsiness. Obviously you're not moving, but you're thinking you're tapping. This drowsiness, this drowsiness, this drowsy feeling, this drowsiness. Just imagine you're doing the tapping And people often report that they don't make it to the second round because after they've done the real tapping,
they're gone.
they're gone. Which has got to be good news, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
That's great. That's great.
yeah.
Thank you. That was
Thank you.
amazing.
I need to
Never
go.
heard of
If you want to stay with Yolanda,
Yeah.
you can, but I
Okay.
need to run.
Okay, go, Antonio. Thank you so much.